Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Miguel back here on the Lights Out podcast. Mike Davis, the MMA detective, on the case again. We got another deep dive. And, we're into territory where this guy, most MMA fans know. Mike, who we got?
Well, we're looking at Stephan Bonnar, and I'm at a little bit of an advantage here because, I think I was at all of his fights except one locally here in the Chicagoland area. And, obviously we're all historians on this podcast. So even back then I was taking notes and paying attention to what was going on. And he was somebody locally that everybody was saying, wait a minute, that guy's special. He's special. He's special. So, we're going to go through his times here on the local grind and, the independent grind. And, he goes to Vegas. I think we're going to take this interview up to his first Forrest Griffin fight and save the rest for a future interview. But it's going to be good. I got some really good, just nerdy MMA stuff.
So here we go. We're going to bring in Stephan Bonnar. Hopefully Chris Lytle will join us. He's out on a run, or maybe he's a little under the weather, drinking too much of that Lights Out bourbon. I don't know what's going on there, but if you're into that, consfinewines.com ships in the United States, and Lights Out bourbon is the way to go for that. Mike?
I will also say, please like, share, subscribe. Our fan base obviously is growing. If we keep going, if we keep growing the way that we are, we're going to break into a top 50 spot on MMA podcasts and kind of give what it is we're doing its, the proper light. So if you guys can like, share, subscribe, listen on iTunes, Spotify. We got people downloading every episode on Spotify, and we see that. It helps us with our ratings. Greatly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, December 3rd and 4th, I'm at Canterbury Expo Center in Minnesota doing color commentary. December 14th, I'm here in Chicago at 115 Bourbon Street doing color commentary for Ignite FC. February 5th, Tampa, Florida, I'm hosting a grappling event. Please register on Smooth Comp, World Class Grappling, February 5th. And, with that, I think we should probably start our interview. Thank you guys so much for your support.
Next time you look up, Stephan Bonnar will be with us. Hey, Miguel back here on the Lights Out podcast, and we're in deep dive territory. I've got the MMA detective, Mike Davis. Chris Lytle, I don't know if he's going to fight again or what. He's getting in shape, and he's going to be joining us after his run. We already have a legend. Stephan Bonnar has joined us for the latest deep dive. Mike, a Chicago native. And I know that we're going to go through his earlier career. I think we should jump right in and talk to Stephan. First of all, hello, Stephan. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there, guys. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I definitely appreciate having you. I'm sorry. I like to hear myself talk too, a little too much. So I want to just jump in and ask you about Carlson Gracie. Carlson Gracie Sr., obviously, when he relocated from Brazil to the States, he has Chicago, deep Chicago roots. A lot of the Chicago guys have roots with him. Why don't you talk about your relationship with him and maybe how that got you started or where that fits in?
You kind of sound like you're from Chicago.
I'm a New Yorker.
Oh, man.
Let's not offend everybody in this city, Stephan.
You talk like a Chicago guy.
I'm sorry about that. I'm blending in here, but we'll talk pizza later. But let's talk Carlson Gracie. Gracie. Now, I know he's a very big influence on you, and as he is to generations of people. But why don't you talk about your personal relationship with him, because you were together with him for a long time there.
Well, yeah, for the last 4 years of his life. Junior ran the school before, and they really didn't have an MMA program. I mean, I was it pretty much, and I had just had my first two fights in a 4-man tournament in November 2001. And at that time, I trained without Carlson, and trained under junior and actually went to a class one of his students taught for the most part. And, really rudimentary boxing skills. There just happened to be the gym had moved. I used to go in college to the Carlson Junior Jiu-Jitsu School when I was home for the summer, and they moved a couple blocks over. And now at this gym, there was the mats and the jiu-jitsu school, then a wall, and on the other side of the wall, a boxing ring, and they had a boxing coach there, totally separate. So it was like, oh, cool, let me start tinkering around with this too. It's right here, I just do the jiu-jitsu class and then go change and do the boxing class. And it really didn't have any intention of fighting. It was just, I just wanted to get good at martial arts, and I love martial arts, love the UFC, but never, thought I'd actually do it. And then in November of 2001, they had the Ironheart crown in Chicago, and I kind of got sucked into it. This one guy in the class had the Carlson Bulldog tattoos, and he was doing the tournament at the lower weight class, and like he was serious, man. Like this guy was diehard MMA. This was going to be his life. And I was like, he's like, yeah, you should do it with me. Come on, man. And I'm like,
who are you talking about?
This guy, Crazy Chris, at the Carlson Junior School. All right.
Okay.
He never turned out to be anything. He got a chick pregnant and ended up screwing off his dreams of being an MMA fighter. But I thought he was like, this is it for him. I mean, the guy's got the double bulldog tattoos and everything. Like, that's serious. And like, he was there all the time training and all the time. And I had just moved up to Chicago after graduating Purdue, and I wanted to get better, but I was having so much fun chasing girls and going out on the weekends, and and I missed training and wasn't taking it too seriously. I wanted to get better at the boxing too. I love boxing, and I always wanted to do it. And, growing up in Northwest Indiana, there wasn't any boxing gyms, but now I'm in Chicago and there's all these Park District boxing clubs, and they have the amateur, the Golden Glove tourneys and amateur fights. So anyways, I just started tinkering around in that, and this Crazy Chris convinced me to do the 4-man tournament for the light heavyweight class in the Ironheart crown. And that was it. I knew once I signed up for that tournament that I just trained my ass off. It'd be no more chasing girls or going out. It would be serious, the Ironheart crown was at the Hammond Civic Center, and Hammond, Indiana is right next to Munster. And like, my God, my whole hometown's going to be there. Everyone I grew up with, my brothers, their friends, my dad, like, that's a lot of pressure. I don't want to get my ass kicked in front of everyone. Like, oh my God, what a nightmare that would be. It was like a bucket list thing. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'll probably get my ass kicked, but I'll do my best. And, I remember after cutting the weight for the fight, I threw my plastics out because I'm like, this is a one-time thing. I'm not going to use these things again. They're all gross now. And at that Ironheart crown, they kept announcing it so much it became annoying that Carlson Gracie Sr. is moving up from Brazil, and now he's going to lead the school, the Carlson Gracie School. Carlson Gracie Sr., the guy who taught Brazilian top team, and Vitor and Murillo, and all those guys that I looked up to and watched. When I was in college and I'd order the UFCs, Vitor would come out, Carlson would be in his corner, and I'd be in awe, like, oh, how awesome would it to be getting trained by that guy. And here we go. I end up winning those 2 fights and winning a belt and getting like the Ultimate Athlete Award. I stopped both guys, and it was like, this? Wow. Yeah.
Stephan, let me frame this just a little bit so people at home can kind of understand how important this was. So the Ironheart crown was one of the premier events in the entire Midwest. Stephan, I believe you were training with Jeff Neal at the time. Am I correct?
Yes, Jeff Neal. Yes. Okay. He was Carlson Jr.'s black belt. Yep. So I was taking his class.
Jeff is still teaching today, and he's a phenomenal instructor. And like, what was his influence with you at this point in your career?
Well, he just helped get me started. He had some fights, and he taught the class. So he was like a good mentor. That at least he knew the MMA game a little bit more than Junior. I think Junior only had one fight, one or two fights. And Junior more jiu-jitsu coach. So at least Jeff Neal had some more MMA experience. And I kind of, I'd go to his class. It was the one that kind of fit my day the best too, with my work schedule. So Jeff Neal, I was training under him for those first fights. And Daniel Viana, name drop him, another black belt from Carlson's there. But it was still jiu-jitsu, it was still with the gi on, and it wasn't really MMA. We weren't wrestling really. I just relied on my high school wrestling. So that was it. The Ironheart Crown, that was like the big show. It used to be called the Chicago Challenge when Jeff competed in it. And I remember first learning how to use the internet down at Purdue, like looking into the Chicago Challenge and seeing the Carlson Gracie Junior School would always win their fights and that. And like, oh, cool, man. Oh, wow, there's a jiu-jitsu school in Chicago, Carlson Gracie Jr. That name sounds familiar. Oh, it must be the son of the guy I hear about, in Vitor's corner. So it's kind of the background on my first fights. And Joe Kane is the boxing coach who got me started there. And I hadn't had any boxing. I didn't start my amateur boxing career yet. I just had the first couple months of rudimentary boxing training, and I was all stiff with my chin down like that in the fight, in the two fights you could see. But like it didn't know defense or head movement. So like that was the best thing. Keep your chin down, your hands up, rule number one.
You went to Purdue?
Yeah, I went to Purdue. Graduated in 2000.
And you didn't wrestle though? You were?
No, I mean, I was a real late bloomer and I didn't get down there till my sophomore year. I went to the community school my freshman year. And in high school, I wasn't really that good. I mean, I was happy with how good I did comparatively. Like my junior year, I just got my ass kicked. I couldn't beat the guy at 52 and I was too small for 160. So, I didn't have too good of a year and, took my ass whoopings. And then the senior year came back and did really good comparatively, where I almost qualified for state. And I actually did a lot better, losing my final match. The guy who spanked me earlier in the year, like I had a close match with him and, almost qualified. So I was happy. But that kind of ended my wrestling career. This whole time, like fighting in the UFC or even fighting MMA was not even a thought in my head. I just love martial arts and wanted to learn the jiu-jitsu.
So let me kind of let the audience know how much confidence that your coaches had in you. So at this stage in your career, you're claiming that you're a beginner. Jeff Neal says Stephan Bonnar was a friggin' sponge. He's like, the guy was there. He put so much work in and he was just absorbing. He was just a guy that was the first at first to arrive and last to leave. And the Ironheart Crown is kind of in the Midwest, probably the premier show at that time. And it was kind of controversial for you to even be in the tournament because you didn't have a lot of like on paper experience. So Jeff had to talk to the promoter, Eric Moon, and Eric Moon was just like, we're not putting an 0-0 guy in here unless I see him. And Eric actually went to the gym to watch you work out.
I remember that. Yep.
Yes. So
I remember Eric coming to the gym. Go ahead.
So check this out. Stephan jumps in a 4-man tournament. His first opponent is Brian Ebersole.
Yeah, chubby Brian Ebersole at 205.
Future UFC veteran. So we had Brian Ebersole on, and he's just like, the minute I saw Bonnar, I knew I was going to have some issues. He's just like, the dude's like built like a tank. I was like, I knew there was issues there. And you won in under a minute by a guillotine choke.
No, that was its second round. We had a good.
Was it really?
Round.
Okay, it's listed as first round online. Okay.
We had a good first round, and he had more experience than me, but I had the size and strength advantage. So, he actually was lighting me up with punches, but I got a good chin. I had my chin down, so they didn't really hurt me. And I ended up taking him down, body lock to a full mount. And I finished the round on top of him, like landing some good blows. And he was wiggling out underneath the ring ropes because we fought in the ring. And I'm like, I went through the ring too, and I'm hammering down on him, and the ref pulls me off, and the bell rings. And I'm like, yes, I won. And no, it's the end of the round. Go back to your corner. And I was like, oh, damn it, So I went back to my corner, but during that round, he tried to take me down. I hit a sprawl, right? And I used my forearm to push his head away, and I landed 2 solid knees. Bang. It's something I always wanted to do my whole life. I've been wrestling since I was 10 years old, and I was always kind of the tall, the tall guy for the weight class, and these short guys would get in on my legs, and I wasn't allowed to do that. So it was like, oh man, I had been waiting my whole life to freaking hammer someone with some knees like that. It felt so good. But anyways, the second round rings, and he tried to take me down, and sunk a perfect guillotine, got the tap, and I went back to the locker room and sat down, and when I went to stand up again, oh my God, where I need him, my the quad muscle there, the vastus medialis, that right next to the kneecap. Oh, it hurt so bad. It was so tender. Like, it was just, that pounding right into his skull. I'm sure it didn't feel too good from his end, but man, it hurt. And then they come down, they're like, oh yeah, the guy on the other side of the bracket pulled out. So we're going to have your finals match next. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? That's like, I just fought 10 minutes ago. Yeah, get ready. You're going to be up again. I'm like, oh, damn. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to fight with this? Like, I couldn't even walk or put weight on it. But once I got in there and some punches started zinging past my head, like just the pain in my leg went away. And, I fought.
It's a good motivator.
Yeah.
So here's the caveat. This is fantastic. So Brian is in a 4-man tournament. I believe, and I don't know, there's very limited information online, but my research tells me on the other side of the tournament was Jeremy Morrison and Kyle Hensgen, and Kyle couldn't continue. So they pull a fresh guy in that has never fought, he wasn't an alternate, and they put Stephan in there for a second time against Josh Kruger.
Yeah, yep.
Was there any push against that at all from your corner?
No, and it was nothing for me. I didn't know who was on the other side of the bracket or who was I'm in the locker room. I thought I just supposed another fight was going on. I'm going to fight the winner of that one. I just figured Kruger was already in there and he got the bye. See, this is something I didn't even know.
Yeah. So
if I could jump in though, when I asked you about Purdue, I know that area had a lot of robust fighting. Like there were a lot of guys. Like, did you know Ebersole? Because Ebersole was kind of an active
Eastern
guy.
Illinois.
Then there was Eastern Illinois, but at Purdue you had Jon Fitch, you had Tom Erickson. You even had a Chicago guy that fought for me one time, who, in an odd way, reminds me of you. A guy named Jim Theobald, and it was because he was really good.
I was supposed to fight him. I got injured. Yeah.
But Theobald was like, there were a lot of good guys in that area. Were you aware of that scene, or were you just really just jumping in at cold?
No, this is the 90s, and then we're really like down at Lafayette, Purdue. Then there wasn't really anything. There was a little martial arts club a guy started that I would go to, and he was like a blue belt. So I just learned the very basics from him before I started going to. When I would go home over the summers, I'd go work in Chicago Heights, and then I drive up to the Chicago.
It's a rough area.
The Carlson, the Carlson Gracie Junior School. So that was it. While I was in college over the summers, it was just a few months over the summers, my last 2 years of college, that I did the Carlson Gracie Junior School. And while I was at Purdue, it really I hadn't gotten into the wrestling, and there really wasn't MMA down there. And I had just started learning how to use the internet. This is the 90s. And that's when I looked up like MMA around the area. And like really all I found was that like Chicago Challenge closest to me up into Chicago area. And that was just like without any training. That was just like, oh my God, there's a Carlson Gracie Junior School. And like, wow, I could go and do jujitsu there over the summers. Yeah, I worked at Roadway in Chicago Heights, so go up to Chicago. Wasn't too far of a drive from there after work to do my jujitsu. But that was it. Like, my last year at Purdue, like, well, my last summer of doing the jujitsu, I went back down to Purdue, and there still really wasn't an MMA scene going on. And then I graduated in 2000. Then I interned at the Hammond Civic Center for a semester. Then late 2000, I moved up to the city of downtown Chicago, and I got my own apartment, little studio apartment in Lincoln Park. And that's when I started, like, really seriously, okay, time to learn some jujitsu, work it into my schedule. And the MMA I wasn't gonna fight MMA. Like, I had no, in my mind, that was like the farthest thing. I wasn't gonna do that. It just so happened that when they moved the gym, the new gym had a little boxing program, totally unrelated to the jiu-jitsu, but just coincidentally right next door to them in the same gym. So that just made it like I had no excuse not to do it. I wasn't like planning on going and learning boxing. Jiu-jitsu is enough. It's so complicated. I had my hands full, But now it's like I had no excuse to. Crazy Chris after jiu-jitsu is going to box. Come on, come box with me. And I couldn't say no. See, that's my thing. The whole reason I became a fighter and then a whole UFC career is just because I'm bad at saying no, Guys like, come on, join this Ironheart crown. Come box with me. And okay, so, that's really it, If that didn't happen, I would have never fought.
Here's another example of where Stephan just didn't say no. So at this time, Jeff Neal he's really respected in the local community here today, as well as back then. And Jeff is telling everybody, this kid's the real deal. He's the real, he's the next big thing. He's the next big thing. And when somebody like Jeff puts his name on a student, it carries a lot of weight, but it can also be a really bad thing for promoters, because Stephan's next opponent was a 7-3 Jay Massey, and Stephan obviously beat Ebersole by guillotine, and they armbarred Josh Kruger. And now he's up against a guy with 10 fights with a lot of mileage on him, who's a really strong wrestler. Do you recall that fight?
Oh yeah, I was really nervous for that one. I remember, like, before the fight, going to drop my girlfriend off at my friend's place. They were all, partying, gonna go to the fights and all happy. And I was just like, I remember my friend kept asking, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I'm like, you go to fight, I'm like, I'm getting focused here. So yeah, he was a hoss, he's a physical specimen and a big guy and had a lot of experience. So I was, really scared going into that fight. So I trained really hard for that fight. And by that time too, see, the good thing about, my career is between the Ironheart crown and that fight, I trained my ass off in boxing. I just had a couple months of boxing, but now, like, my hands were actually getting decent. I might even had an amateur fight by then. So, like, I had a little more confidence in my hands. So the plan was to, keep it standing and use my reach. But, I had a decent guillotine, and, he felt my reach and tried to take me down, and, I was able to slap it on.
Yeah, that was a quick one. So you had Joe Kane, your boxing coach, and Jeff Neal in your corner. And it was almost like your coming out party, because people were like, Ebersole, ton of experience. Kruger obviously had a lot of local respect, but, Massey, everybody knew. And they're like, man, Massey's going to put it on. Like, we're going to see just what kind of grit Stephan has. And, you hit him with the guillotine in just over a minute. And you kind of were just like, after the fight, hey, it's kind of easy. Whether you were nervous or not, sitting in the audience that day, I'm like, man, he just made something really hard look really easy. Did it surprise you how fast that fight went?
Oh yeah, I was ready for a war. I was ready to, go out there and like, have a Forrest type of fight if I had to. I was just so ready to go to war. So just the fact that I was able to, sink that in. Really, that caught me by surprise. And I trained really hard, and I'm like, I haven't even broken a sweat. I don't have any marks on my face. Like, this is crazy.
You had a ton of people there.
Yeah, it was a big event, the ultimate athlete event. They brought Frank Shamrock in. Oh, my brother too. He's sober now, but a terrible drunk. And after that, I'm, trying to get paid. And, they're in the office there, and Frank Shamrock's on the other side. My brother's trying to get in, and like him and Frank Shamrock get into it. And next thing I know, it's like Frank Shamrock's about to beat my brother's ass. And I had to go like break it up. And I'm like, I'm like, Brent, you fucking idiot. Like, what's wrong with you? I picked up the Ultimate Athlete magazine. Frank Shamrock's on the cover with like a belt. And I'm like, this is who you just started a fight with, you dumb fuck. What's wrong with you? So, oh man. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have a quick one there, but that's the beauty of the MMA and why I love it so much, and more than any of the other sports, doing the taekwondo and the wrestling and the boxing. You're so limited to rules, and it's in those transitions where the openings are, and that's what it was. I was firing my jab on them and making them think about that. I might even have blistered him up with a jab or two, and it made him want to shoot. And when he shot, he penetrated hard, and I was able to catch his neck. And it's like, that's the beauty of it. You get someone playing one game, and then the openings and some other thing they're not thinking about are there. And that's kind of the whole beauty of the sport.
Miguel, Chris is waiting. He's waiting in the to let him in.
Oh, cool, perfect. Hey, I wanted to ask you about that promotion though. Is that was that promoter Clyde Gentry? Do you remember who ran that show?
It was the promoter that did the event in California.
They were California guys, if I recall. Yeah.
And they got shut down after like a big riot, and somebody got stabbed.
Yes.
So, but this was their first show, and like you said, it was a big show with the magazine and stuff. And I remember Clyde was an author who wrote an early history book on and I think he was the matchmaker there. But was that show ran well? How did you feel? Like,
yeah, I thought
this was
it's still pre-athletic commission, so like no hand wraps or anything. But that made things kind of easier, not having to deal with all that. But I thought it ran well. They did great. They filled the place up. The production was way better than the Ironheart round in terms of the screen and the pre-fight little presentation, and they cut you on screen and your sound bite, and
the lighting was
incredible. The lighting was really good. Yeah, it was like a pro wrestling show almost.
Yeah, they had like the cage, UFC. That lighting cage. Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, so it really looked professional. It looked good. Yeah, it was a big crowd there. Yeah, it was. I thought they were going to be a successful show. I was really upset. To see them, throwing the towel after that stuff happened in California the way it did, because they had the magazine too, and that's where at the Ironheart Crown, they were there, and I got an award that night called like the Ultimate Athlete Award, a little plaque, and they kind of presented awards. So they kind of, I guess, if I recall correctly, I think so. I have that plaque, the Ultimate Athlete Award, and I got it at the Ironheart Crown, and that was the name of the show, right? Ultimate Athlete. Yeah. So Genesis event, the beginning.
Yes. So after this, Stephan gets he fights for Joe Goitia, September 7th, 2002, Maximum Fighting Challenge, where you match up with future UFC veteran Terry Martin, and you win by decision. So we kind of got to see what was in your gas tank, but Terry wasn't exactly happy with the result of that fight.
I don't know. I felt like I ended the fight. I think I got the decision because I had a triangle slapped on at the end, like he had taken me down, and I put a triangle down, and 4, 3, 2, 1, and they made me break, and he slumped over on his back, It was a 10-minute round. So, I knew he was tired too, and it was hard for him to breathe. So I felt like I would have got that. And I got right up and lifted my hands, and it was a good back and forth fight. I felt like I did better, like hitting him with knees and shots from the clinch and going for stuff off my back. And he never had me hurt. He threw some bombs, but I had my hands up and they knocked me off balance, the shots. But it was an exciting fight. I remember the crowd went nuts. We brought the house down, and I got the win, and it was a little bittersweet because his homies were there, and they let me have it, coming out of the ring, I just remember them being really disrespectful.
They were calling him all types of names, man.
I don't believe this, first of all, but Stephan, do you say it was like 1 10-minute round, or was it a 10-minute round?
Yeah, 10-minute round. But the one thing a lot of people don't know, we were supposed to fight at a catch weight of 210 because I took the fight on just a couple days' notice. I heard they were having a show, so I called Chilgoitia. I was like, could I get a fight on that? It was on a Monday, and then he's like, the show's Saturday. I'm like, oh wow, this Saturday? I'm like, damn, I'm going to Jamaica Sunday. I had a gig where I get to go to these resorts for free, and I'd have to teach one exercise class a day, and I could bring my girlfriend. So I had this free vacation all planned out, and I didn't have any spending money. So I wanted some spending money. So I called Joe Guigia. I was like, let me get a fight. And what's the pay? And the show money for it was $150 and $150 win bonus.
Hey,
and I was like, oh wow, if I win this fight, I'll have $300 for Jamaica. Hell yeah, sign me up. So I'm like,
what a deal.
5 days, it's going to be hard to make 205. And he's like, okay, we'll do a catch weight. Just get to 210. Okay, no problem. So the weigh-ins come, and I get on the scale, 210 pounds. All right, I step down. Terry Martin gets on the scale, 234. And I was like, he got down, and I was like, what? You didn't even try, man. And he got all in my face and really mean looking, intimidated me. Actually kind of scared me. So I was like, don't worry about it.
Don't cut.
Yeah, pounds, don't worry about it.
Were the homies there intimidating you too?
What's that?
Were the homies in the background intimidating you too then?
Yeah.
Terry Martin's a hard case though, because you make eye contact, you look down, now you're looking at his bullet hole, and it's like, oh fuck, I mean, he's a tough dude.
I already pissed him off because he caught me staring at him. I didn't even know that was my opponent, Terry Martin. I'm looking for a white guy, but I kept looking at him, going, oh my God, that's got to be one of Mike Tyson's offspring. I bet you he came through Chicago and freaking knocked up his mom back in the day. Like his face looked really his eye. He has the same eyes as Tyson, and he could definitely. I test his DNA. He's related to Mike Tyson. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and he at the time is working out at Combat Doe, which is out of Cicero, Illinois. It's incredible, the type of activity that takes place there at this time, lots of federal cases, lots of gang activity. And the people that went to Bob was kind of almost like a rescue center. He would just take people off the street, try to, keep the dog in a fenced in yard. But, almost every single event, one of them escaped and, maybe bit somebody. So that was the type of people that were cornering Terry at this time. And Stephan is a pretty proper guy, as you can tell. So it's two opposites.
Yeah, the ghetto was there that night.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, dude, when Stephan left the ring, I couldn't believe what they were saying to him. And I'm like, man, there's going to be a fight here. And I think security came over and just kind of cleared those people out. But if you would have swung on one of them, you would have been 100% in the right at that point.
Yeah, I wanted to, but I was so damn tired from that 10-minute round, man. That was rough.
So
he would have been 100% in the right, but maybe 100% shot too. So we don't know.
So with Terry, where his big thing was, Miguel Torres was one of the judges. Miguel Torres is his boy, but you know, I don't know. You know, that's
No,
neither here nor there. He never let
that's
it go.
before me and Miguel had become friends. That's before he came up to Carlson. So I didn't know him at that point. You know, the first
Either
I'd seen
way.
of him was the Ironheart crown, and that was the second I'd seen of him. Between like the Ironheart crown and that, like I never talked to him or anything, and I never really met him at the Ironheart crown. He fought
And if you're gonna have a judge,
little weight class.
if you're gonna have a judge, why not have somebody that knows what it is that they're looking at? I mean, Miguel would definitely fall into that category.
Yeah, and definitely Miguel would be advantage. Like that was the advantage of finishing the fight in the triangle the way I did. You know, Miguel is great from his back, and like that's points. You know, that's attacking. That's trying to finish the fight. So, you know, the fight ends and you got the guy in the triangle like that, then it looks good. You know, it's good. It was a close fight. You know, and I think the really gave it to me is the way I got up, lifted my arms, and he slumped to his back at the end of the fight.
So check this out. This is where Stephan's career gets just friggin' bonkers crazy. So that's September 7th, 2002. You got a year off, a full year off.
Wait, was Carlson Sr.? He wasn't there that night, was he?
He wasn't there, but that's when you really became enmeshed with himself. Because
I think he had just moved up and he couldn't make it that night or something. But yeah.
But you two took to each other like right away. And you know what really kind of helps that is like, you know, I'm like hustling t-shirts at the time, you know, it's cutthroat fight gear. And we would always hear little rumors about you and Mikhail Roshkov, a guy that you guys used to refer to as Bulgaria. And they would say, Stephan and this Roshkov guy, it was like they were saying it's a pay-per-view event every single time these guys go together in the gym. Do you remember those training sessions?
Oh yeah, he was a nut, man. He got kicked out of the gym. He was great at leg lock. So the good thing about training with him is it really taught me how to defend my legs. But yeah, he ended up tearing up like 8 people's legs and getting thrown out of the gym eventually. But until that time, we were the MMA team. You know, it was me and him. And I can't remember, maybe it was like 03, but it was after the Terry Martin fight. But then Miguel Torres started coming up. So it was kind of like the 3 of us. But yeah, the Bulgarian, no one wanted to roll with him, you know? So it'd be time to roll and, you know, no one would want to roll with him. So it would, I'd have to roll with him. But he was strong. He was strong and he'd attack a lot. So made for some good grappling sessions, that's for sure. The Bulgarian, I still keep in contact with him. He moved back to Bulgaria back when Obama got into office. And he's in Europe. He was in Austria last time I talked to him, but great guy, honestly, like just a solid, good guy. I actually lived with him for a few months too, and I was in between places in Chicago. So he lived with his parents. They won a lottery to come to America, and you know, they all worked really, really hard. You know, menial jobs too. His mom worked at like Motel 6, and he was a bouncer. I can't remember what his dad did, but they all worked hard. And he was so cheap with his money, but they were able to pay off their house in Chicago, pay it off in full, and then sell it for a profit, and then move back to Bulgaria to retire. So it was really brilliant what they did, you know, coming from a country like that.
Yeah. So from here, this is where it gets a little nutty. Jeff Neal is all in, and he gets him a fight in Brazil, Jungle Fight 1, actually, against Lyoto Machida.
Oh, Carlson Senior got me that fight.
Was Senior? Okay. I knew.
But
go ahead.
By this time, Senior had been up and I was under his wing. And that's really like, I didn't plan on fighting, you know, the Ironheart crown was going to be just a bucket list thing. I'll just try this. And then I got, you know, couldn't say no and you know, took another fight. And then Carlson Sr. moved up. And when he moved up, he got to the gym, everyone pointed at me and said, "This is your MMA fighter. Here's your team." And I was like, shit, I guess I got to fight now, you know, like, fuck, like, this is so awesome. I'm getting to train with this guy. Like, this is like my life's dream come true, but I didn't count on it being like this, you know, I just wanted to learn from him. So, but, you know, I had a couple fights then and he moved up and, you know, I was the big fighter of the gym. So he took me under his wing and yeah, next thing I know, it's 2003 and he's on the phone with Valide Ismail, you know, And those guys talking Portuguese, man, it just sounds like they're yelling at each other, you know. And he's and Portuguese, blah blah blah. And I'm like, my God, dude, what's he saying? I go to Daniel Viana, you know, the Brazilian. I'm like, what's he saying? You know, on the phone, he's like, oh, he's telling Validi, he's like, I got a fighter here who'll kick anybody's ass, regardless of weight class. He'll beat anyone. Like, I'm like, what? Tell him to shut up. I'm a light heavyweight. And I'm screaming there. Screaming.
Who's he talking about? I'd be like, who's he talking about?
Yeah.
Who, me?
What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah.
Like he was saying, regardless of weight class, he'll kick anybody's ass. And I'm telling him to shut up. Like, I'm a light heavyweight, a 205er, you know, like I'm not a heavyweight. I didn't want to fight those big ass guys. I saw like fucking Bustamante have to fight Tom Erickson in like a 30-minute match. I wanted no part of that. No thanks, man. I'll fight light heavyweight. I want to be big for my weight class. But that was it. Like he talked enough shit for me. Fala merda to Validi, and you know, Validi got a hold of Lyoto Machida, and that was jungle fight number 1.
So a caveat to this, we just interviewed Mark Schultz. Mark was on the undercard where the controversial fake fight took place against Montenegro.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. I remember it mostly because I think they fought before. That was before my fight, and we were sharing a locker room. So, and we got along. We clicked. You know, he spoke English, and you know, we flew from. I went down to Rio for you know, a few days to kind of get acclimated and train at Carlson's gym in Rio, which is pretty cool. It was so hot. It was like 120 in there. It was ridiculous. But, you know, the fight was outside in the Amazon. It was like a 6-hour flight from Rio to get to Manaus. And we land, and I think I'm going to a hotel, you know? But no, we go to a boating dock. And they're like, get on the boat. And, you know, I'm like, what, are you serious? And next thing you know, we're like 2 hours deep in the Amazon River and coming up on this ecotourism resort built all above the water. And I sat with Mark Schultz, and that's, I got to know him, and we talked. And you know, it was like I had heard a story about his brother Dave getting shot by DuPont and all that. So like I had heard of him and the gold medalist, and it was just like, wow, how crazy that I'm on a fight card with this guy. You know, he's a legend. And we shared a locker room. But yeah, after the fight, Schultz came back and he was all pissed off. And I was like, hey, you know, it's all right, dude. You just got caught. It happens. And he goes, that's not that was supposed to happen. I'm like, what? He's like, I was supposed to get disqualified. And I'm like, oh shit, man. It was a work. So there were a couple, what's his name? Antonio Inoue was the promoter on that. And he's a notorious pro wrestler. So he told Schultz that, you know, he was going to have a worked fight and he was supposed to get DQ'd. I don't know what they agreed to exactly. But it was a DQ, and that's why he was so. I mean, I'm sure he would have been pissed anyway if he just legitimately lost. But he was really pissed because that guy wasn't supposed to do that, which was funny. And another guy was sharing the locker room with, the Korean guy who fought a Japanese guy and lost, of course, was smoking cigarettes before his match. And
calms you down.
Fabricio Verdun and Gonzaga had, I think it was both of their first fights.
Yep.
And it was so sloppy. Verdun won, but it was like it was before either of them had stand-up training, and it was a lot of the jiu-jitsu cancel each other out, and they just had a sloppy ass stand-up battle. And I didn't know anything about Machida, so I'm looking at this card thinking, man, you know, I'm going to kick this guy's ass. Like, these guys don't look that good, you know, and like karate, like that shit works in fucking MMA, you know. And little did I know, he was even a southpaw, and I hadn't fought a lefty yet too. And, but after I got in there with him and he was slipping my punches and being so elusive and sticking and moving, man, it just like, it woke me up quick. Like, this dude is no joke. This guy's freaking good.
So he was the national karate champion. So was his father and his brother. And it was somebody that Inoue was grooming, you know, for Pride, or for Japan, I should say.
Yeah, Nokia took him under his wing, and the thing that tipped me off, I couldn't get any video on him, so that's why I didn't know he was a southpaw. So I think he had one fight before that, and I couldn't get the video. But I was reading an interview with him, and the one thing that tipped me off is, they asked, how do you get started in fighting? And his answer really was a red flag. His answer was, my father has been training me since birth in Machida karate. Like, holy shit, most guys start wrestling in middle school or something. And this guy's been fucking training since birth and Machida karate. What's this dude's name? Lyoto Machida. Wow, his family's got their own style of karate. Like, but I've been doing a ton of boxing at this point, and I was confident. I thought, I could beat him going into that fight. Says I didn't know. I didn't know how good he was.
How was like the bugs and like the heat? How was just the atmosphere at the event?
It wasn't bad. Everyone's like, "Oh, you better go get your vaccines," and you're going to the Amazon, get vaccinated, and all that. And I'm like, yeah, right. Whatever. But it was really hot there, but it was beautiful, man. It was like I can't remember the name, the Arayu Resort, I think it was called. It was like this resort built seriously in the middle of the Amazon River. And there was like these little walkways up from the river, the little wooden like bridges you walk on, and in between these big planks. And the rooms were like huts stacked on each other. They were really nice inside, but like every day in the afternoon, well, most days it would just be this most torrential downpour you've ever seen, like the craziest monsoon type storm. Like, look, it felt like the roof was gonna blow off the hut you're staying in, and like 30 minutes later, it was like it never even happened. It'd be all sunny and dry again, and they had bananas hanging all over, and there'd be monkeys swinging around getting the bananas, and you could see like alligators swimming around, and the mosquitoes were like as big as my hand, and it was wild, man. And there were like a lot of Brazilian top team was there, like the Minotauro was there. I remember getting a picture with him and like Paulo Filo. So it was a hell of a show. Like looking back on it. During the intermission, Antonio Noke jumped in the water and swam through the river a little bit, and got out, do a little something showman-y like that. But Carlson Sr. couldn't make it down to that. So who cornered me for that fight was Jeff Neal.
Right. So Jeff told me that there was like huge spiders. They had to sweep bugs out of the ring in between fights because the lights were just attracting them, and they would die in the lights and then fall on the mat. Jeff, like he's still traumatized by that experience, actually.
Oh man. Yeah, and I got cut. That fight got stopped on a cut, and like I swear, the guy who sewed me up was like the same guy who was pretty much the janitor. I saw him taking the garbage out and shit. This guy's not a doctor. Like, and it was the worst stitch job. It was all crooked. Yeah. Oh boy, what a time. And we actually went to Rio. The best part about that trip was after the fight, we went back to Rio for like 4 days of just enjoying Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and going out with Jeff Neal and, going to the restaurants. But we went to this one club, and the rule was you had to wear long pants, no shorts allowed. So Jeff Neal didn't bring any pants. It's hot there. It's Brazil. So he actually went to the club in his gi pants, his white gi pants.
Hey, you never know, man. We
got
to bust those bad boys out.
I love it.
They didn't have pockets, so he just crumpled his money up in his hand with paper drinks like that, and just held his money like that. But yeah, rocking the gi pants. And he had these almonds in his suitcase, and on the way down, the almonds, like the can exploded and spilled everywhere. So the gi pants had these brown streaks all over them too. It's like white gi pants with brown streaks. What a trip, man!
So from there, about a month and a week later, 5 weeks later, you're back here fighting in Chicago. So you weren't really concerned about the stitches. You fought Rockford BJJ student Brad Lynde, who's actually a pretty tough guy.
No, that had to have been longer than 5 weeks.
I got November 22nd, 2003.
It's 9 weeks, but
9 weeks. Oh,
okay,
fuck.
9 weeks. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you,
so,
Miguel.
it's okay. You forgot October.
If you know what, man,
yeah, I could do that. 9 weeks for a
Look at
cut.
Chris
Yeah, I
shaking his
could
head.
handle that. But yeah, he was
Disappointed.
tough. He had a good record. He was a good wrestler. Like he won state a couple times in high school in Illinois, which was usually tougher than Indiana. And I think he was like 9-1 or 9-2. So he was tough, and he was tall. He was like 6'4", southpaw. So I knew like that I trained hard. Like I knew that was going to be a tough fight. I thought it was going to be. And you know, I just ended up. I kind of got lucky. He had a good Greco throw where he'd push you into the ropes and use that momentum to, you know, underhook toss you. And he actually landed. He hit me with it once, and I was able to. He probably expected me to play on the ground, but for that fight, I just said, if he takes me down, I'm going to get right back to my feet and make him box. You know, I'm only going to play guard when he's worn down, and you know, I'm not going to play guard at the beginning when he's fresh. So he's able to pop right up off that takedown. He hit me with like, I think 2 takedowns that I popped right up off. And the third time he went to hit it, like I knew it was coming. So as he pulled me, like I hooked my, I bent my knee a little bit and my leg caught the rope. So he didn't have that momentum going down. And, you know, is it cheating? I don't think so. But yeah, he did that. I just remember that helped me stuff his takedown, and then I got his back, and you know, I had a pretty good. I was getting pretty good at my rear naked choke. I'd been watching a lot of Marcelo Garcia at that point, so that was like my new favorite move. I was rear naked choking everyone in the gym. So yeah, I was able to after I stuffed that takedown, get on his back and sink that choke pretty quick.
Stephan, you know, just like I do, man, wrestling is like the most tiring part of this sport, I think. And if you're a wrestler and you take a guy down twice and he pops up and then he stops your takedown, you're mentally done, man. You might be mentally and physically. That's so difficult. If somebody you get the takedown, they get right back up. That's disheartening, man. That's
a good point. I was able to pop back up off those and hit him with some punches. I'd been doing a lot of boxing. I think I had that was still 2003. I'd won 1 Golden Glove title at this point. So my hands were decent. You know, I had enough amateur boxing fights to kind of have an advantage on my feet. And I felt it. I felt how easy it was to land those punches, and he didn't like it. But that's a good point, Chris. Yeah, like I was able to pop to my feet off those takedowns, hit him with punches. And after I stuffed that one, you could feel, like you said, that confidence, like, oh, and that's all it took for me to just, you know, get on his back and get that seatbelt going and finish that thing. That's all it took, that little lapse, that little mental lapse there, just that little sigh he gave out, just gave me that opening.
Now, Stephan, real quick, you talked about, you know, I didn't like your comment, you know, Illinois being better than Indiana in wrestling. It's okay, though, but I mean, go over your wrestling background a little bit.
Well, I started wrestling really young when I was like 10 years old in like 5th grade. And yeah, I wrestled at the Lanoke Park District. And for the Lanoke Park, we were the Thornwood Thunderbirds, and out of Cal City, Illinois, that's where we would wrestle from. And I was always big for my age and like baby fat and really late bloomer. So it was good for me. I got used to getting my ass kicked. Like I'd fight these little Mexican black kids who were like fully developed, like hairy armpits, veins coming out of their chest and arms. And you know, and I'd fight them tooth and nail. And, you know, like a lot of times they'd beat me, but, you know, when they go to raise his hand afterwards, he'd be off throwing up in a bucket. You know, I'd put it on him later in the 3rd round. So, yeah, I did that pretty much through, what was that, like 5th grade up into high school. And then high school, I actually quit wrestling my freshman and sophomore year because I hadn't hit puberty, man. Seriously, I went to wrestling practice as a freshman, and man, the kids that I used to just spank in middle school came back freshman year with, like hair all on their legs and hairy armpits, and guys that I used to laugh at what a fish they were, and I killed these guys. Like all of a sudden I couldn't beat them. And I remember I lost like to Bo Ryban, a guy I used to absolutely kill back in middle school, and I just couldn't take it mentally. And I'm like, I hated wrestling, and I was doing Taekwondo at the point too. So I was like, I'm just going to go like full speed Taekwondo, screw wrestling. And then finally, like after my sophomore year, I sprouted up from like 5'8" to like 6'2" and grew some pubes. And I was like, woohoo, I'm going back to wrestling, I went back junior and senior year. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't that good. It was a late bloomer. I wrestled like 170 my senior year on weight gainers. And made it the second round of semi-state, and went to a community school my freshman year of college, Purdue Calumet. So I transferred down to Purdue as a sophomore. Really, like wrestling wasn't really on the radar, I kind of wish, looking back on it now, I would have. I didn't no idea I'd end up doing MMA. But at the time, I wasn't really affiliated with wrestling. I had a year off. I was really into working out, and I love martial arts. And the UFC came out, and like, oh my God, I want to learn this jiu-jitsu thing. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So I found that Carlson Junior School, and I kind of, really was drawn towards that in college. And like that, by then the sport was so new, jiu-jitsu guys were killing everyone. So I'm like, the hell with wrestling, I'm going to, be a jiu-jitsu guy. And I was all about the jiu-jitsu and fighting off my back and throwing on triangles and arm bars. And the wrestling kind of got put on the back burner until I got on the show, and I had Randy Couture as a coach to The Ultimate Fighter in 2004.
That helps. Yeah.
Let me just rewind just a little bit. So the Ironheart crown, when you fought Brad Lynde, that is actually a legendary show where Miguel Torres and Ryan Ackerman fought, where Miguel's like 30 plus fight win streak comes to an end. Here's the thing though. It was Shudo rules. Did you remember watching that Miguel fight?
Oh yeah. Yes.
What were your
Shudo
thoughts?
Rules were so, I don't know. I thought it was really close, thought it could have went both ways.
But
Yeah,
with
Shudo rules.
the catch system?
The catch?
Okay, so for instance, if you got a close submission, the referee would call a catch. He would raise the C on his hand, and it would make it almost like a knockdown, like a 10-8 round.
Yeah.
And they weren't calling him for Miguel, and he was hitting triangle after triangle and armbar.
Yeah, I remember that. That's what it was. Like Ackerman just was on top the whole time defending his game. Yeah, and that's the biggest problem I've had with judging over the years. It's definitely getting better now, but yeah, like when you're on your back doing everything right and the guy's defending your game, it's like, is he really winning? And that's like, it gives those wrestlers the advantage. They're all strong and they just stay on top and explode out of submission attempts and usually get the nod. And that's how that fight was. And I thought
Miguel won.
It should have been in Shudo rules, right?
Based on the rule set. Yeah.
But also was really weird about it, and I didn't like, was you knocked the guy down and you had to go to the neutral corner and he got an 8 count.
Yeah.
I remember
he would stop a finish. Yeah.
Oh, I remember when one fight we skipped was Bill Hill.
That's next.
Oh, okay. But yeah, when he fought Terry Martin, Shudo rules, I was in the locker room with Terry Martin, and this is after we fought too. I witnessed him put 2 rolls of just pure tape on each one of his fists. He had like casts on his hands, and then put the gloves, and he just brought whatever gloves you wanted. He put these little flimsy gloves over the cast pretty much, and he went out there and he freaking knocked down Bill Hill about 4 times, like 2 times in the first, 2 times in the second, before it was finally over. But I was like, oh my God, stop this fight, like he got his bell rung so bad and would get up, barely beat the count, only to freaking get floored again. And it was just like, at that point, I realized like these rules are stupid, man. Like, and how am I gonna, like, if I hit a guy and drop him, I'm not gonna finish him, you know? Like, that was really bizarre to me. And
Yeah.
you know, thankfully it didn't happen.
So your next fight, go ahead, Miguel.
I was just going to mention that Brad Lynde was a little project of mine. I was a matchmaker. I probably matchmade about 7 of his fights before that. And then you went and ruined that whole little project for me. Thanks, Steph.
Oh, no way, you were managing him.
No, I was I was hooked up with his manager, Dave Strasser, and those guys I was matchmaking for their show in Racine.
So you helped make that fight.
Yeah, and I let him go to that fight as a test. He had just come off a draw from Ebersole, and he was big and for 205 had some potential, but that's okay. It's okay. I'm not holding it against you.
It's over 10 years.
But it does also just show that the Ironheart crown was a legit test and a show that weeded people out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, he was a solid dude with some potential. I expected him to have a better career. He kind of fizzled out after that. So I expected him to kind of, he could have done better. I mean, with his reach, his southpaw, his athleticism, he had potential.
Okay, so you take 16 months off, and then on June 5th, 2005, you fight, is it April 24th? I got my dates mixed up. You fight on Total Fight Challenge against Bill Hill, where you get a 1-round knockout, first round knockout.
Oh yeah, that was a fun fight. Like I said, he had that fight with Terry Martin where he got dropped a bunch and some bad brain damage. So
for real. He's not lying.
Yeah, he had a bad attitude, but I remember just like my boxing was really solid then, and his wasn't. So I just remember, like I hit him with some clean shots, and it seemed to me like he was out on his feet because I hit him with a couple good right hands in a row, and then I'm like, oh God, this guy's done, and I really loaded up for the big one, and haymaker, and right then the referee came in and waved it off and actually prevented that big punch from landing. And I remember I was a little pissed. I was like, what do you do? Oh, let me hit him one more time. And of course after that he had to be like, oh bullshit, I'm fine. But the one thing I remember about that fight is the referee calling the fight off. He's out on his feet, it's over. And me being pissed, why couldn't you let me?
You ruined my good knockout.
Yeah.
Hey, did you wrap your hands up real good too, just like Terry Martin? Because that works against this guy.
Terry was there.
Man. First time I wrapped my hands was for the UFC fight with Bobby Southworth. That was the first time. I always thought it got in the way of my grappling.
So Terry was there that night, and you guys had a little bit of an exchange. Terry was very unhappy still about the decision that you guys had in the fight, and really? Terry was chirping at him.
Yeah, I don't really remember too much of that.
I was there.
Wow, so he was. See, I was on cloud nine. I was all happy with my win. He was mouthing from the audience a little bit. I think I was used to it by then, drowned them out. But he didn't get in my face or do anything disrespectful. If he was talking some smack, it was from afar.
Yeah. So Stephan, at some point you break your left arm in one of your fights, and you don't. From what I understand, you never went to the doctor to kind of get it looked at.
That's Forrest.
That was during Forrest Griffin's fight? Okay.
No, that happened to Forrest. He broke that arm and never got it taken.
Well, they mentioned, Joe Rogan said it was you in one of your fights in the UFC, and I just kind of picked up that little footnote.
No, it was
okay.
Forrest.
Okay, fair enough.
Broke my
hand. You guys.
Early in a fight.
But let me ask you, so you haven't had a ton of fights, but you've had high-level fights. Are you thinking, are you aiming for the UFC at this point? Have you turned pro in your head yet? Or are you going on TV to a reality show just for the kicks of it? Is that where's your mindset going into this? Because by now you know you're pretty good.
Yeah, by now I had a good number of fights against some quality opponents. So, and I knew Machida was good too. So after I fought him, I went back to my gym, with a loss, which is always the first day back in the gym, and you see everyone and you lost, like you feel ashamed and all that. And, oh, don't worry about it, shake it off, you'll be back. And, everyone's saying the nice things to you, but you feel ashamed. And then I'll never forget, like, a couple months later, he fought Rich Franklin and knocked him out pretty convincingly. And then I went back to the gym after I saw that, and I'm like, aha, I knew that fucker was good. So felt good.
Stephan gets a quick win against Sean Salee. And here's the thing after this fight.
I know Sean Salee.
He's scheduled to fight November 20th as the main event for the Ironheart crown against Bobby Southworth. Unfortunately, both of those guys got pulled to the Ultimate Fighter, and that fight, the poster's made, it's hanging up. You see both of them front and center, and the UFC comes and takes both of these guys for the reality show.
Yeah,
probably a good move.
Isn't that crazy? I still have that poster.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question. That was Ironheart, Mike?
Yes.
Like, are you signing contracts for them?
No, it's all by mouth. Eric Moon. I'm the champ. I got the belt.
You're still the champ.
My belt. Yeah.
Because in Hook and Shoot, at least we had contracts where, I wouldn't hold a guy back. Chris is a good example of, a guy like, you let go guys to bigger shows, but they could have, if they had contracts, they could have blocked you from doing that.
Yeah, but Eric Moon didn't have contracts, and I just remember I got the call from the UFC saying, hey, you're going to be a part of this reality show, or at least come out to the castings week where we're going to have 40 of you guys out there, and we're going to, lock you up in the Palace Station for a week, do all your medicals, get some on-camera time with you, and then from there, we're going to narrow it down to 16 guys. So I knew I had a shot. I knew it wasn't like for certain then, but boom, I got called out the castings week.
Did they fly you out?
Yeah, they fly me out, locked you in the Palace Station. I had never been to Vegas. So my first week in Vegas, just looking out the Palace Station window at the white lights, like, oh my God, it looks like so much fun out there. But meanwhile, there's like security guy making sure you don't leave your room. So
sounds like fun.
We weren't allowed to go anywhere. But yeah, we did that castings week, and I remember I got that call, and it was like, oh wow, like this is quite an opportunity.
Was this through senior?
What's that?
Was this through senior?
At the jiu-jitsu school, training, and guys we're talking about the reality show, and if you remember, the Contender just started.
Dude, the Contender was fantastic.
So anyways, Frank Stallone came to Chicago, and they had tryouts for the Contender, and I'm like, oh cool, like, yeah, I box, I've won the Golden Gloves twice now, like I'll go to those tryouts. And they put me in there with someone who was just like a juiced up tough guy who didn't even know how to box, and I beat his ass. So I'm like, all right, I'll probably make this show. So I go to the gym, and the guys are talking about the reality show that the UFC's having. And I'm like, oh no, you guys got it wrong. It's Sugar Ray Leonard and Stallone are putting it on. It's a boxing reality show. Yeah, I went to tryouts last week. I fucking destroyed this guy. I'm gonna probably make it. And they're like, no, the UFC's having one too. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. And then sure enough, I went home that night, went to UFC.tv. They didn't own UFC.com back then, and lo and behold, like the Ultimate. The UFC's having a reality show, The Ultimate Fighter, and we're choosing the best fighters from the country to be on this show. If you're interested, audition tapes are due like on Friday, and I'm like, oh cool, like what they wanted was to put your fights on a tape along with you know, an on-camera interview with you so they could see how you are on camera talking. So I just did that. I slapped that together and like sent it out and forgot about it. And yeah, a couple of weeks later, I get the call that, you know, they're going to fly me out to the castings week. And even then I thought, okay, you know, like it's still a long shot, you know, if I even make it on here, but you know, what the hell, it's a good opportunity, I'll go. And that was that week out in Vegas, being locked in the Palace Station. And you know, at the end of the week, they sent us back, go back home to the gym. And I think it was probably maybe a couple of weeks or a month later that I get the call that.
And you weren't allowed to kind of roam the casino at this time, am I correct?
At castings week, that we were locked in our room. Like if you like left your room, the security guard would like, you know, tell you to get back in your room. You're not supposed to leave. And I didn't know anyone there either. And it wasn't like, I didn't really have like a big desire to sneak out. So I'm just like, you know, I'll play nice and stay in my room. And I dealt with it.
Did you have a roommate?
No, it's by myself.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by yourself in the room. But that's when I met Bobby. Me, him, and Swick went out to some medicals together, and he was big, man. So I didn't even recognize him. I remember the only thing I had known of Bobby Southworth is him fighting Vitor in Pride, and he was skinny. You know, he was like a skinny guy with good stand up. So we're all of a sudden we're going to medicals, and it's me. I'm talking to Swick, and he's like, Bobby. I'm like, Bobby, and I'm like, whoa, you're Bobby Southworth, and like, yep. I'm like, wow, you're fucking huge, man. He was like, you know, he was really heavy, you know. So he you know, he had to cut a lot of weight on the show. So I'm thinking if that fight would have happened in the Ironheart crown, I probably would have destroyed him. He probably wouldn't even have made weight, you know. He wasn't too motivated. Like he showed up on the show really heavy and out of shape. I showed up in shape, you know, like I could have made weight like the second day, but he had so much trouble making weight that first time. But he did, he made it. And then we fought a couple weeks after that. And by that time, he had got the weight off and his cardio was a lot better. So that's why I was pissed off. Like I wasn't so pissed that Loden lost to him. Mike, in my head, I did really slow on that challenge. I was like not even trying, you know, that one challenge we had to pull the canoe and run the sandbags back and forth. We did those stupid challenges before, you know, when the show started, to determine who fights who. And the loser of the challenge has to fight. So I was like, oh my God, dude, if the loser has to fight, that means the loser gets to pick his fight. Like that's actually an advantage. So I'm like, I'm going to throw this. I'm going to fucking lose on purpose. And I'm going to pick Bobby because he's so fat, like he's going to gas out, you know? So I just dragged my ass during that challenge. I was like not even trying, but he was like so out of shape. He's like collapsing and shit and cramping up. So I couldn't even lose the challenge. Like if I trying to, because he was just so out of shape that he was so dead dog tired on the challenge that he was like laying down and shit. So I'm like, fuck, I got to cross the finish line. So I did. And then he picked Loden to fight. And I was so mad at myself for like, you know, you should have threw it. You should have faked like you twisted an ankle or something. Because I
carried him over the finish line ahead of you.
Help them out or something. Yeah. Lifted him out ahead of me. Because I knew he was Chuck's first pick and he had fought in Pride and I didn't know Forrest too well. So it was really like he was the guy to beat. And like, fuck, like if I could have taken like the top guy out, you know, when he was weak, that would have been more ideal. But instead, you know, I didn't. But so we had a fight while he was in better shape. So
we had Jon Fitch on about a month and a half ago. And he actually got kicked off the airplane and had to go get his luggage because, you know, he got rejected on the airplane for Tough One. And he claims that on the way there, none of you guys were told that you were fighting. Like it was a surprise on the show and you guys found out you were fighting each other once you got there. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the way they originally had it planned out was we're going to do those stupid challenges. And that's how we were going to eliminate everyone down to the finals, and then just the finals fight. And then after like that first challenge or two, they realized how stupid this was, and they really need to have us fighting, because it was the athletic commission. They were like, we can't do it because you can't have a fight and keep the results secret. The athletic commission, like, as opposed to results, it has to be done through the athletic commission. Yeah. And so there's no way we could keep it a surprise while the show gets edited before it airs, because it didn't air till like 6 months after we shot the show. So they really didn't have that figured out. They were just shooting from the hip. So they actually said, like, at first that we're going to eliminate the guys who challenges. And see, they did that, like the first two guys got eliminated that way. And then
it's like Chris Sanford and somebody else got eliminated, right?
Yeah,
right.
And Jason Thacker, yeah.
Thacker, yeah.
Yeah, strange brew. They realized how stupid that was, and they worked something out with the athletic commission. If they make it an exhibition fight, then they'd be allowed to have it, but it would have to be like 2 5-minute rounds. And I guess if it were a draw, it'd go to like an overtime round. So yeah, by making it only 2 rounds and calling it an exhibition, they could get away with not posting the results, but that way it doesn't count on your record. So which is
then like a 3-minute overtime. Yeah, the 3-minute.
Yeah,
and,
there's a draw.
So we're from the Midwest, and it used to drive me crazy. So he would call it, like Dana White would call it, sudden victory.
Sudden death. Yeah.
It's sudden. You hear that, Miguel? Sudden death.
Sudden death.
Yeah. I'm like, sudden victory. I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's him just trying to be PC. I think he might even called it sudden death, and then someone talked him into switching it.
So let me ask you, what was, so you get there, obviously, Southworth always big, and Swick is a pro and stuff like that. What was Jason Thacker like? I mean, what was going on there? Because I got theories. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. He just like, I just was really like, what's this guy doing here? And all I could think of in my head is like, they purposely took, at least one guy that really didn't belong there to
like
show
from the audience.
How difficult it was. They couldn't have like everyone. Yeah, like for your armchair quarterbacks, like this guy actually had like a handful of fights, so he actually did have some experience, but he wasn't that good. And after training with us a few days, he knew he was in way over his head. So that's why he wanted to quit, and kind of tried to quit, but Bobby had to show some face for TV and like big brother him and come on, you could do it, don't quit. And it's okay, I won't quit. And then he gets thrown off the show the next day anyway. So that was my whole theory with Thacker was like, that was their way of showing how difficult it was, and just to show like a guy who had some experience.
Yes, set one guy up to fail. Yeah.
They wanted to show somebody quitting, and somebody who couldn't hack it, and somebody who couldn't push through all the, because it was like that training was no joke. Like,
and it's in Vegas.
He overtrained the shit out of us. Like, he trained us so hard. I was so run down. And like, what really saved me was I got a staph infection, pretty bad, impetigo. The house couldn't handle the shit of all 16 guys. So like the tubs and shit like threw up like poop and manure, and it like got all over the house. That's my theory of how it got on. And then the camera guys would walk on the mats. So like, somehow a staph outbreak occurred like right after that septic problem happened in the house. So coincidence?
Well, it's gotta be
I don't think so. So I had it the worst, and Sam Holger had it a little bit, but Dana really freaked out. And like, had I had to fight Southworth like at the point of how I had been training then, there's no way I could have. That was a tough fight. There's no way I could have fought as hard as I did. But since I got the staph infection, they went and quarantined me for a couple days in a hotel away from the house. And that's why I wasn't on that episode with Chris Leben and Koscheck and Bobby Southworth, where they all they went out. There was the one night they got to go out, the whole 8 weeks on the show. The one night they got to go out and
you're quarantined.
Drink, and then the spraying Leben with the hose and Leben smashing up the house and just all the drama. I actually came back from my quarantine the very next day after that. And oh man, I got to the gym and everyone's like, "Oh, Bonnar, you won't believe what happened. Oh my God." And I just heard this story out of like so many mouths that like I couldn't wait to see that episode on the show. Because like to see it like firsthand, like from hearing about it, I was so excited to see it. But yeah, I was gone. I wasn't in that episode at all, if you recall. I think I was gone from like almost 2 episodes. But I come back to the gym and everyone on my team, like Nate and I think it was Nate mostly, was like, "You got to fight Bobby. You got to get him out of the house. You got to break up him and Koscheck." And he was like their toughest guy. But in my head, I was like, well, I said, he's my guy. Like, we were supposed to fight anyway. I got the poster for it. So like, what the hell? Let's do it, you know? That's kind of how the
Stephan,
with Southworth happened.
I got to tell you though, in my book, watching that series, you had the best line of the whole series, drop dead in my book, and that was when you caught the guy stealing, and you were looking through his stuff. You're like, "I don't even have a hat," or something. It was just the driest, most like one line like that I just burst out. I couldn't stop laughing. What was that like? Who was the thief again? What was going on?
Sam Hoger. So we were
the Iowa guy
for the missing supplements, right? But in his suitcase, we didn't find the supplements, but holy shit, there was all this surplus of beanies and swag and gear that other people were missing. And he had like a big stack of beanies. And I go, "Sure would be nice to have a beanie."
Yeah. Yeah.
It was awesome. It was definitely great.
So your second round, Mike Swick. Mike is severely undersized. He's 6'1". I think he weighed 192. So you've got a guy that's just eating whatever he wants, ordering whatever he wants. And he lands a guillotine in the beginning of the fight that had you groaning a little bit. How tight was that?
Yeah, the thing is, like, me and him trained together for 2 months. So we knew all each other's tricks. And I would actually I caught him a ton of times training, but like I'd always mainly catch him in head and arm chokes, right? So I don't think I landed one triangle on him the whole 2 months we trained. And he never guillotined me once the whole 2 months we trained together. And now we fight, and here we are in the fight, and boom, this little bastard almost freaking guillotines me. Yeah, it was tight. Like, I couldn't believe it. I remember thinking, like, what? Like, fucking, he wasn't able to land this the whole 2 months of training, and now, like, the one time it counts? Like, no way I'm tapping out to this. Like, no way. But it was, yeah, you saw after that, he had a lot of guillotine finishes. So he's got a good guillotine. But I, was really a little too confident, thought I was too slick for it. And he almost slapped it on me. So, but I got him back because the whole 2 months, I wasn't able to catch him in a triangle. But you know what? Like, here's another little secret most people don't know. He was able to pull out of my triangles because I usually don't train with a cup on, and he was skinny. So like he was able to pull out of my legs. So for this fight, I wore this big ass ringside cup, that had a little foam on the outside. So now like the diameter in between my legs was a little less. Like he doesn't have as much room to slip out now that I have a cup on. So that cup came in handy.
The Shorty car is special.
Totally. If you see it too, like I look a little weird, like because I had to pull the shorts up over the top of the cup. So my shorts are pulled up really high. So I kind of look like a dork, like I got my shorts pulled up too high. It does. It looks funny. I remember Diego saying something like, "Dude, pull your fucking shorts down." And I think
it's called like, is it like horse hoof or something like that? It's like the opposite of camel toe. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was at the ringside, the boxing, not the really big ones, but the ones that do have some foam over the top, and that helps cinch the triangle. And I'm telling you.
Okay, so how long were you in the house for?
8 weeks.
That's
Yeah.
2 months. Okay, so now they start airing the show. And in between you being there for 2 months, which I mean, that's like a prison sentence. I mean, it really is. You take 5 months off before you get to the finals. Were they paying you in between the end of the show until the finals?
God, no.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
pay is a controversy with that show because originally you guys got there and they were like, well, they're exhibitions and you're getting a weekly stipend. There's no pay for fights.
No pay.
What were you making a week?
It was like you got a $500 a week stipend. So you got $500 a week to cover the bills back home. So that fight with Southworth, I got absolutely nothing for. But that fight with Swick, you only get a bonus when you stop the guy. But since I stopped him, I submitted him, I got the $5,000 bonus, which, yeah, I was happy with that shit. You know, like I went home with $5,000. I could have, you know, if we would have went the distance, I would have won a decision. I would have went home with nothing. So
that's insane.
And nothing to keep you quiet and tide you over for the 5 months before it airs and before you go back to the finals.
It's called you got to go get your ass back to work. You know?
Well, could you have fought somewhere else?
I don't think so. No, I'm sure I was signed. Yeah.
So think about this. You can't fight anywhere. We're not going to pay you, and you better be in shape for the finals.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was their like Hail Mary. They had to pay to put the show on. Like the way it usually works is you get a network to pick up your show, and awesome, and they produce the show. They pay for the whole production crew and all that. Then they get the money from the sponsors. The UFC paid for the production crew, so they put a lot of money. It was kind of like bribing your way on the TV. Like, okay, like if you air this reality show, we'll pay for everything. Oh, well, shit, man. And then we just collect money from the sponsors. It's like a no-brainer, like nothing to lose. So, and two, like in my head, like I always knew this show would be like a huge smashing success and the UFC wouldn't be going anywhere, but they were worried. Like I heard, you know, them talk about the 62 million in debt and some of the production crew saying like, this show's never going to make the light of day. So there was a lot of doubt there. It wasn't such a guarantee. And even when we went into the fight with Forrest, they didn't have anything set for a second, third, and fourth season. It was only after that fight that they signed for a couple more seasons. It was, after that fight, like in the back locker room area with the executives. But yeah, they had to drive their way on TV. They were really in the hole financially. So like, you know, we didn't get any money. So
that's nuts.
But you know, when I'm used to fighting, like, you know, not what, a year before that, I fought Terry Martin for $150 show money. So I leave the show with $5,000. And I think my biggest payday was like $1,500 or something. So leaving the show with $5,000 made me feel a little better.
There was an unusual like amount of police presence at the exhibition fights. Did you notice that?
So the fights on the show?
Yeah, on the exhibitions. Yeah, there's like 6 or 7 uniformed police officers at every single one. I was shocked at that.
Huh. I don't remember. On season 1, are you sure? I remember
the
medics there.
I watched it during Swick. I'm like counting like uniformed police officers like in the area, in the like the fight area.
Some of them might have been medics. I remember the medics had like the blue the blue pants and blue shirt on, the little badge.
It might have been. Okay.
And the other ones might have been a couple of the cops like sneaking over to watch it, you know. But yeah, I don't remember that. I remember one of the medic chicks Forrest hooked up with.
You're muted, Stephan. You're muted.
My cops are notorious for trying to get free tickets for shows.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are, for sure. So leading up into this, when you look at significant fights in the UFC history, UFC 1, obviously, I mean, you're never going to outdo UFC 1 in terms of overall significance for the UFC. But number 2 is probably your fight against Stephan Bonnar, April 9th, 2004, in the tough finale. I mean, it's
2005, yeah.
Man, dude, see, I thank God Chris is in here. I'm never going to hear the end of it. April 9th, 2005, you are correct. Against Forrest Griffin. Going into that fight, did you think it was going to be the war that it was?
Yeah, I did. I knew like my best way to win was to make it that way. I knew that like he prided himself in his conditioning, and he usually came around the later rounds, and so did I. So I thought the best way to the best thing I could do is to jump on him early and to make him fight at a faster pace much earlier than he's used to. And I did. I wanted to set out and just set a torrid pace, and everything he came at me with, the answer right away. And because I knew he'd keep going. I knew he wouldn't like really try to pace himself. And it worked brilliantly. I just couldn't put him away in the second round when I had him hurt. And he was able to recover. And then I got as tired as he was. And I was dog shit for the third round. But yeah, I knew that was my plan, is to make it a barn burner, to just
his
make
plan,
it like a really fast paced fight.
Okay, so when you look at, and you remember, I've seen you fight live several times up until this point, you are at your best when you're leading and you're chasing and you're stalking. You know, like that's, in my opinion, is where you're at your best in a fight. And Forrest did something like, part of his game plan was taking that center cage and making you try to fight him off of that of the center of the ring. And largely in part, like that little movement seemed to work for him. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I felt like I was really beating his ass, and I was going to knock him out. I really did. I felt like I was going to stop him in that second round. I felt like everything was working fine. And I just gassed out. Like, I set too torrid of a pace for myself. And in the second round too, there's this point where we're on the inside, and I was able to get his head and boom, drill him with a knee that just landed flush, like so good. And then a short little right hand, right when Herb Dean walked in. It's hard to really see it, but that landed great, and he slumped back. And I knew he was hurt, and I was like, I got so excited, like, this is it, I'm gonna finish him. And I went in, kind of jumped in with a Superman punch that just grazed him. And when I did, I fell into him, and he was able to tie my arms up. And once he tied my arms up, like, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to knock him out. I got to get my arms loose. So I used all my energy to pull my arms loose. And then once I got them loose, like, that was it. I was done. Like, I couldn't lift my arms. Like, it just hit me, like total exhaustion, total adrenaline dump. And really, that third round, I was just going on fumes. I had nothing left. So, yeah, it may have been working well for him, but like, I almost had him out of there. Like, I had him hurt. And I just knew if like that, I was just able to land maybe one more good one. Like, that would have been it. But I didn't land that big one when I had him hurt. So.
I thought you won the fight, man. Like, if I rescored it, I thought it was 2-1. I thought you won 2 rounds.
You know what? Like, looking back on it, like, everything happened perfectly. The right guy won that night, really. Because really, it was about putting the sport over that night. Like, we had to sell the sport. We had to make everyone watching, or everyone who was watching, who talked about it with other people, to be proud of being a fan, and to realize in their hearts, like, these guys are all right. Like, why is this illegal in 38 states? These are just normal guys like me and you. And I think that more than anything, that kind of, everything's projection, like that